Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being promised guaranteed returns, massive profits, zero risk, and they're about to lose everything. The history of financial fraud is littered with schemes so devastating, they didn't just destroy bank accounts, they destroyed families, toppled governments, and even sparked civil wars. This is the story of the Ponzi schemes that made billions disappear, and the thousands of lives that were shattered overnight. And if you think it could never happen to you, that's exactly what they said. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn could save you or someone you love from financial ruin. A Ponzi scheme is one of the simplest frauds in existence, yet it's also one of the most devastating. Here is how it works. A fraudster promises investors extraordinary returns, often 20%, 50%, even 100% or more per year. But instead of actually investing the money, they simply use new investors' money to pay off earlier investors. As long as new money keeps flowing in, everyone's happy. Early investors get their returns. They tell their friends. More money pours in. The scheme grows. But here is the fatal flaw. It requires an endless supply of new investors. The moment withdrawals exceed new deposits, the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. And when it does, everyone loses, except the person who ran the scam. The scheme is named after Charles Ponzi, who became famous for it in the 1920s. But he was not the first, and he certainly was not the last. In fact, some of the schemes that came after him make his operation look like a lemonade stand. Let us start with the one that changed everything. On December 11, 2008, federal agents arrested a 70-year-old man at his Manhattan penthouse. His name was Bernard Madoff, and he had just confessed to running the largest Ponzi scheme in human history. Madoff was not some street hustler. He was a Wall Street legend, a former chairman of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, a man so respected that people literally begged to invest with him. His firm promised and seemed to deliver steady returns of about 1% per month. That is 12% per year, which might not sound spectacular, but here is what made it remarkable. Madoff claimed to deliver these returns consistently, month after month, year after year, regardless of market conditions. When the market crashed, Madoff's clients still made money. When everyone else was losing their shirts in 2008, Madoff's statements showed gains. Except it was all a lie. Every single statement, every return, every dollar of profit, fabricated. The real number? Madoff defrauded investors of approximately $65 billion over at least 2 decades. Some estimates suggest the fraud may have started as early as the 1970s. But here's what makes this story even more devastating. Madoff's victims were not just wealthy celebrities. They were charities, universities, pension funds, Holocaust survivors who had already lost everything once. Regular people who had trusted their life savings to a man with an impeccable reputation. When the scheme collapsed, $68 billion in assets that investors thought they had simply vanished overnight. Tens of thousands of people lost, yes, everything they had invested, plus all the profits they were told they had earned. Some victims lost their homes, others lost their retirement. Several reportedly took their own lives. Even Madoff's own son, Mark, hanged himself exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. He died there in 2021 at age 82, having served just 12 years of his sentence. To this day, victims have recovered only about 75% of their principal investments. The phantom profits are gone forever. But here's the terrifying question everyone wanted answered. How did he get away with it for so long? The answer is disturbing. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, whose job is to catch exactly this kind of fraud, had been warned about Madoff multiple times over the years. They investigated him and they found nothing. Why? Because Madoff was a master manipulator. He kept his investment advisory business exclusive and low profile. He turned away new investors, which only made people want in more. He fabricated sophisticated trading records, and most importantly, he had credibility that was almost impossible to question. When you are the former chairman of Nasdaq, people do not ask too many questions. But Madoff was not alone in fooling thousands. Let me tell you about a scheme so massive, it actually destroyed an entire country. In 1991, Albania emerged from one of the most brutal communist dictatorships in history. The country was desperately poor. The average monthly income was around $80. People had no experience with free markets, capitalism, or investing. Into this vacuum stepped a series of pyramid schemes that would make even Bernie Madoff's operation look small by comparison, at least relative to the economy they were targeting. By 1996, approximately two-thirds of Albania's entire population had invested in these schemes. They were offering monthly interest rates of 10% to 25%. One scheme, called Suja, promised to double your money in just 2 months, a 100% return. Think about that for a second. In a country where people earned $80 a month, these offers seemed like a path out of poverty. People did not just invest their savings, they sold their homes, borrowed money, mortgaged property, and poured everything into these investments. The total value of these schemes reached $1.2 billion. That might not sound enormous until you realize that this was nearly half of Albania's entire gross domestic product at the time. Half the country's economic output was tied up in fraudulent pyramid schemes, and the Albanian government publicly endorsed them. Government officials supported the largest companies. The president defended them. When the International Monetary Fund warned that these were obviously fraudulent schemes, the president accused the International Monetary Fund of interfering in Albania's internal affairs. Then, in January 1997, the schemes began to collapse. And Albania did not just experience a financial crisis, it experienced complete societal breakdown. People took to the streets by the hundreds of thousands. Riots erupted across the country. Protesters stormed government buildings and set them on fire. They looted food depots. Then they raided the national armories. In a country of 3 million people, 700,000 firearms and 1.5 billion rounds of ammunition disappeared from government stockpiles overnight. The violence lasted for months. More than 2,000 people were killed. The government collapsed. The president resigned. Foreign nationals were evacuated. Parts of the country descended into complete anarchy, with no functioning government, police, or military. Thousands of Albanians, desperate to escape, crowded onto unseaworthy boats and tried to flee to Italy. Hundreds drowned in the Mediterranean. The economic damage was catastrophic. 1.8 million people, more than half the population, lost their money. Many lost their homes. Some lost everything and ended up homeless. The Albanian currency lost half its value. Inflation soared. Production collapsed. To this day, Albanians use the term Nent Gjëteshtat, year 1997, as a cultural shorthand for trauma, loss, and chaos. Only about 500 lawsuits were ever filed. Of those, only 71 remain outstanding. Almost no victims ever got their money back. Some of the scheme operators fled the country. Others served short prison sentences. The maximum penalty for fraud in Albania was only 5 years. And here is the most painful part. Many of the people who orchestrated these schemes are now among the wealthiest residents of Tirana, Albania's capital, driving luxury SUVs and dining in the city's finest restaurants. The poverty they escaped by defrauding their own people turned into personal wealth. This is what happens when an entire society falls victim to financial fraud, but you might be thinking that could never happen here. We are too sophisticated. That's what people said before Tom Petters. Before Bernie Madoff became the face of American Ponzi schemes, there was Tom Petters, a Minnesota businessman who ran what was, at the time, the largest Ponzi scheme in United States history. Petters built a business empire that owned Polaroid, Fingerhut, and a controlling share of Sun Country Airlines. He was a billionaire, a philanthropist, a man who hosted charity galas attended by governors and politicians. He lived in a $5 million lakefront mansion in Minnesota and a $9.5 million estate in Florida. He owned multiple yachts and a private jet. He was living the American dream. Except the entire thing was built on fraud. Between 1995 and 2008, Petters ran a $3.7 billion Ponzi scheme through his company, Petters Company Inc. He told investors he was financing the purchase of consumer electronics that would be sold to major retailers like Walmart and Costco. The business model sounded legitimate. Petters would provide short-term financing to vendors who bought electronics in bulk, then sell them to big box stores at a profit. Investors would get a cut of those profits, typically returns of 15 to 20%. The problem was simple. There were no electronics, there were no bulk purchases, there were no sales to Walmart. It was all fabricated. Petters and his employees created fake purchase orders, fake invoices, and fake warehouse receipts. They fabricated everything. New investor money was used to pay off old investors and to fund Petters' lavish lifestyle. For more than a decade, nobody noticed, or if they did not say anything, because the returns kept coming. Then, in September 2008, the scheme unraveled. A Petters Company Inc. employee, Deanna Coleman, approached federal prosecutors and confessed. She agreed to wear a wire for 2 weeks, recording conversations that exposed the fraud. On September 24, 2008, federal agents raided Petters' headquarters. He was arrested shortly after. At his trial, prosecutors revealed the scope of the fraud. Petters had stolen billions to finance what they called his extravagant lifestyle. The mansions, the yachts, the private jet, the luxury cars. All of it paid for with other people's money. In 2009, Petters was convicted on 20 counts of fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison. He is currently serving his sentence at the federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. His release date is May 13, 2051. He will be 103 years old. As of 2021, victims have recovered about $722 million, only about 20% of what was stolen. The rest is gone forever. But what makes the Petters case particularly disturbing is this. The fraud was uncovered in 2008, right before the Madoff scandal broke. The bankruptcy trustee later said that in 2008, Ponzi schemes like this had never been uncovered before. This was before Madoff. Think about that. 2 massive, multi-billion-dollar Ponzi schemes collapsed within months of each other. And those were just the ones we know about. So how do these schemes keep happening? How do smart, educated people keep falling for the same scam over and over again? Let me tell you the warning signs you need to know. First, guaranteed returns. In investing, there is no such thing as guaranteed returns. Anyone who promises you consistent, high returns with no risk is lying. Period. Bernie Madoff promised consistent returns regardless of market conditions. Tom Petters promised 15 to 20% returns with minimal risk. The Albanian schemes promised to double your money in 2 months. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Second, exclusivity. Ponzi schemes often create an air of exclusivity to make the opportunity seem more valuable. Madoff famously turned away new investors, which only made people more desperate to get in. If someone's making it difficult for you to invest with them, that's not a sign of legitimacy. It's a manipulation tactic. Third, lack of transparency. Legitimate investment firms will show you exactly where your money is going. Ponzi schemers will offer vague explanations, use technical jargon, or refuse to explain supposed proprietary methods. Madoff's so-called split-strike conversion strategy was deliberately complex and difficult to verify. Petters fabricated purchase orders and made it difficult for investors to verify actual inventory. If you cannot understand where your money is going, do not invest. Fourth, consistent returns in inconsistent markets. Markets go up and down. That's normal. Any investment that shows consistent gains month after month, year after year, regardless of market conditions, is suspicious. Madoff's statements showed steady gains even during the 2008 financial crisis, when the entire market was collapsing. That should have been a massive red flag. Fifth, difficulty withdrawing money. When Ponzi schemes start to collapse, they create obstacles to withdrawals. They might impose penalties, fees, or waiting periods. They might tell you your money is tied up in long-term investments. When people started wanting their money back from Madoff in 2008, there was not enough cash to cover the withdrawals. That is when the scheme collapsed. And here's the most important warning sign of all: pressure to recruit others. Pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes both rely on bringing in new investors. If someone is pressuring you to bring in friends and family, that is a red flag. The Albanian scheme spread through word of mouth, friends convincing friends, family members convincing family members. By the time it collapsed, 2/3 of the country was involved. That is not investing, that is a contagion. But here is what most people do not realize. Ponzi schemes are not just a thing of the past. They are happening right now. In 2023 alone, 66 Ponzi schemes were uncovered, nearly double the number discovered just 2 years earlier. That is a new scheme discovered about every 5 days. The schemes involved nearly $2 billion in potential investor losses, and that is just the ones that were caught. Recent years have seen a surge in cryptocurrency Ponzi schemes. Scammers promise massive returns on crypto investments, then disappear with the money. Others use complicated DeFi platforms or NFT projects to disguise what are essentially old-fashioned pyramid schemes. The methods change, the technology evolves, but the fundamental scam remains the same. Use new investor money to pay old investors until the whole thing collapses. And when it does collapse, the people at the bottom lose everything. So what can you do to protect yourself? First, educate yourself. The more you understand about how investing actually works, the harder it is for someone to scam you. Real investments have risk, returns fluctuate, markets go up and down. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling you something. Second, diversify. Never put all your money in one place, especially not with one person or one firm. Madoff's victims lost everything because they had concentrated their entire life savings with a single advisor. Third, verify credentials. Check if the person or firm is registered with regulatory authorities. In the United States, you can look up investment advisors with FINRA or with the SEC. If they are not registered, do not invest. Fourth, get independent verification. If someone shows you account statements, verify the statements with the institution directly. Call the bank directly. Check with the brokerage firm. Do not just trust a piece of paper. Fifth, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. If the returns seem too good, if the explanations are too vague, if you are being pressured to act quickly, walk away. Madoff's victims ignored red flags because they trusted his reputation. Petter's victims ignored warning signs because the checks kept clearing. Albanian citizens ignored basic logic because they were desperate for a better life. Don't make the same mistake. Here's the brutal truth about Ponzi schemes. They prey on our deepest hopes and fears. They target people who are desperate for financial security, people who want to retire comfortably, people who want to leave something for their children, people who believe they've finally found the opportunity that will change their lives. Bernie Madoff's victims included Holocaust survivors who had already lost everything once. They trusted him with their life savings because he seemed like someone who could finally give them security. Tom Petter's victims included pension funds and charities, organizations trying to do good in the world, trying to make their money grow so they could help more people. Albanian pyramid schemes targeted an entire nation of people who had just escaped from brutal communism. They saw these schemes as their ticket to the prosperity they'd been denied for decades. These were not stupid people. They were not greedy people. They were hopeful people. And that hope was weaponized against them. The lesson is not to refuse trust entirely. The lesson is to understand how the game actually works. Real wealth is built slowly through consistent effort, diversified investments, and patience. Anyone promising shortcuts is selling you a fantasy. And when that fantasy collapses, you're the one who pays the price. Remember, by the time you realize you're in a Ponzi scheme, it's already too late. The money is gone. The fraudster has either fled or is spending your money on yachts and mansions, and you're left trying to piece together what's left of your financial life. That's why awareness matters. That's why understanding these schemes matters, because the next one is already out there, right now, looking for its next victim. Will it be you? Will it be someone you love? Or will you be the one who sees the warning signs and walks away? If this video opened your eyes to how these schemes actually work, share it with someone who needs to see it. Because financial literacy isn't just about building wealth, it is about protecting what you already have. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever encountered something that seemed like a Ponzi scheme? What made you suspicious? And if you want to learn more about protecting yourself from financial fraud, hit that subscribe button. Because the best defense against scammers is knowledge. Thanks for watching. Stay skeptical, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.